welcome to another evening of the Suicide Prevention Social Media Chat. I am your moderator for tonight's All-Star panel. I'm at Doc Foreman, and I'm so excited to be here, mostly because we have a great panel tonight. Also, they're not as afraid of me as I would prefer, and I'm mildly sleep deprived. This means, for those of you who are new to the show, that you don't know what's going to be said, you don't know what topic I'm going to ask, and neither do they. This is mildly like the Hollywood Squares.
It's not really.
I want to introduce my co-producer, co-moderator, partner in crime, Mr. Tony Wood. Tony, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tony Wood at ADWWW. If you have any questions during the show, feel free to tweet at me at ADWWW.
And the truth is, you're actually on panel today, right?
I guess so.
Yeah. He doesn't even remember, people.
I guess so. Why am I on this panel?
What happened? It's because it's a oh my Lord, we just did the warm-up.
Oh, that's right, we did. Yeah, I'm on this panel because we're going to be, Quantify is going to be at the White House Open Data Innovation Summit this week, September 28th. The Walter E. Washington Convention Center. 1,200 people from across the President's Open Data Initiative will attend and listen to brilliant things that people say about innovation and open data.
Now, there is one person that you're absolutely going to avoid while you're there because he's a known criminal.
Glenn Coppersmith.
Right. Dr. Glenn Coppersmith, say hello.
Hi, guys. That's the best introduction I've ever gotten from you guys. Oh, fantastic.
So you're also going to be at this event this week.
Yes,
so and we didn't know about this event when we planned this, like back in April, just so that you know. But Glenn, tell the folks a little bit about what's going to be happening on your end this weekend.
Sure. So we get so Quantify helped you guys launch this Our Data Helps site a little while back, and that's been slowly garnering steam and gathering people, creating a data set for all of us to do analysis with and to help us better understand suicide prevention. And that is one of the things that was selected by the White House to be featured as part of this Open Data Innovation Summit. And so I have the distinct and perhaps dubious pleasure of giving a 5-minute Ignite talk where slides are going to auto-advance for me, and I'm going to be kicked off the stage.
Sweet.
So that sounds like it's going to be
pressure there.
perhaps entertaining
Really
and I think a little bit informative.
Folks. Like they literally, like even during the pitch sessions, like by phone preparing for this, like you do your thing and they start playing music and like the Star Spangled Banner or whatever, and you're off. So like, Glenn, speed it up.
I think I got it, but it'll be interesting either way. So we'll be in good company. I'm sure if you haven't heard about Our Data Helps and you've been listening to SPSM, I'd be shocked. And then we have to talk with April more. So I won't belabor that point.
Right.
But I'm super excited to be there, and I was super excited to be here until I see the total chaos that we're in today. It's going to be a fantastic panel. Tons of fun.
This is when I was with the linguists at Johns Hopkins, they found that I used the word fabulous every time I then talked about something truly horrific. Like it was like, oh my goodness. So the patients, just do all these violent things. It's fabulous. And they'd be like, every time you say fabulous, it's not fabulous. And I'm like, tonight it's going to be fabulous. It's really going to be fabulous. We have Dr. Bart Andrews. Dr. Bart Andrews.
What's going on? Dr. Bart Andrews at Behavioral Health Response in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm excited about the show. Always a great show when Glenn joins us. And I can't wait to hear from Nathan because we've got some really cool stuff to talk about.
And Nathaan is here too.
Oh, no, am I saying it wrong?
Yeah.
We could have covered that in the pre-show. No, we didn't cover that in the pre-show. No, we saw
we
Glenn's
did.
kid. We saw your kid. We talked about Colorado, but nobody tells me how to pronounce Nathan's name. No, I'm not gonna get resentful about that at all, or mention it all on the air.
Second A and Bart, you've got to get the second A in. Let's see, not even. But Bart, you're going to talk a little bit about use of technology and media in mental health. And in fact, you work at a crisis center. You don't just work there. You're the Vice President of Clinical Operations, correct?
Vice President of Clinical Practice and Evaluation, April.
And you guys do actually different tech tools related to that. You guys actually are known as tech innovators in the crisis field.
We have tried some things. We do chat and text, and we've tried some different things. We had a project for a year and a half that we learned a lot from the kids about how not to do innovative implementation. So yes.
Absolutely.
Experience.
And so, and without any further ado, we're really excited. So we met Dr. Nathaan, is it Demers or Demers?
Demers. Just say it fast. You're good.
Demers. See, we got the first name, but not the second. The good news is we've got no one's name right on SPSM. This is literally the Muppet Show of suicide prevention. But we're going to call him Dr. Nathaan because I just really like his first name. So we met him. He was so much fun talking about how he was already using social media and technology to do outreach, to talk about mental health and mental wellness. Then, of course, you were with a different person who has a very similar name with a very cool hat. And
Nate Mohat. Well done.
Right, but I'm trying to not confuse Bart. Stop.
Sorry, Bart.
And so we meet literally the coolest cat today at the poster session. They had so much to say, and Nathaan was like, we need to get together and do a panel and talk about some of these topics. Since we've seen you, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. You've also had like a job change, I believe.
I do, absolutely. So, hey, everyone, Nathaan, one more time, Nathaan Demers. That was especially for you, Bart, just so we're clear.
Wait a minute. Foreman completely blows your last name, but I get called out on your first name 3 times.
That's true, but we talked about it in the pre-show. You might have just not been paying attention, which is okay. You might have tuned us out, but
He did have some audio problems early on.
That's
it's possible.
true. We'll let him off the hook.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Dr. Coppersmith.
I got your back, Bart.
All right, Nathaan Demers at Dr. Demers. I'm a clinical psychologist, worked in a lot of different parts of the field, and now I'm working for a startup called Grit Digital Health, where we're working to connect college students with mental health resources as a way of upstream suicide prevention. And rather than just focusing on mental health, we decided to make it a little bit bigger, kind of lessons learned that we know that sometimes people aren't so apt to go just to a mental health website, but they are really interested in overall wellness. So that's the approach we've took, and really exciting, and really excited to be here.
BuzzFeed quizzes.
We have not as of yet, but hey, we're open to anything. We can go wherever we want to go.
RA in college, I'm just letting you know the Cosmo quiz, popular.
Pretty good.
That's all.
That's fair.
Back in the 90s, back in the day. So Dr. Nathaan, we're going to be kicking off a panel, and I get to pick all sorts of questions to ask. As a matter of fact, for folks back home, we have had a couple of brainstorming questions, and I took some notes. And so I'm going to propose a question. This is tonight's format. We're going to try to get through 4 questions, or you guys have to be so fast that I can't get a word in edgewise. Either way, and either way is winning. This is a game, and either way is winning. On the integration of technology into the mental health and suicide prevention space. So really specifically focused on SPSM, we're going to be talking tonight about the different challenges or important ideas that we see that need to be talked about or that need to be better discussed by experts in the field. And Nathaan is going to start, and I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to give each of you guys like 1 minute of commentary and then discussion. So I saw this on a game show and I thought it might work. So
like all great ideas.
Yep.
I actually did watch some Hollywood Squares today. So Nathaan, we think that it's true that in the mental health field, for reasons we aren't clear about, they tend to irrationally be avoidant and react with helplessness when technology is introduced in the general public, let alone when technology specific to mental health or suicide prevention is introduced. Why do you think that is?
I wish I had a perfect, great answer for you, and I really don't, unfortunately. But what I do think is that for some reason we don't, as a field, don't embrace it well. And I think what we really need to tap back into is we have a lot of expertise. We evaluate new breathing techniques, treatment centers, therapies, and all that. Why can't we use a very similar set of criteria to evaluate what we're doing in digital spaces rather than just shunning it and saying, no, I just want to do therapy all the time?
That's a great question. You should answer it now.
I know, I should. I think partly our field, we are really rooted in our past, for better or worse. I think we're really into the medical model, and we do really well when people come in our doors and we know what to do. And technology is really this new sort of forward-thinking edge, and unfortunately, I just think we're not totally jumping on board.
Okay, we're not totally jumping on board.
Still didn't completely answer it. But
but I'm going to pick a clinician then to go next, and then I'm going to head to the technologist. So Bart, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that, and it's really funny because I got an email from my kid's school, Chloe, and they said we've proceeded with an abundance of caution. Was in the email, and I realized that our entire mental health approach around technology has been with an overabundance of caution. We have cautioned ourselves into a corner where very few folks. We've got folks here on SPSM where we see folks moving and grooving, but in the mainstream mental health system, there's diddly squat going on with technology. Right? And we are suffering, and the people that we're serving are not getting the best services and the best possible options because we are so far behind the 8 ball on involving technology, and it's because we are overly conservative in our efforts. Everybody's so afraid of making a mistake or taking a risk. We are risk adverse. And here's the thing, in business, being risk adverse in business is tantamount to just saying, I don't want to succeed. If that's your approach, if you're risk adverse, you're saying, I don't want to succeed. And that's what we've been doing for, 20 or 30 years, saying, it's good enough. We don't want to take any chances.
It's good enough. That was perfect. Dr. Glenn Coppersmith, from a technologist's point of view.
So can I be half technologist and half not? I think
No.
Bart's exactly right about the abundance of caution, and there's a fine trade-off here.
Wait, can we get that on a loop? Can we get that on an audio loop? Bart was exactly. I want that. Somebody tweet that
To his wife.
This is a spectrum, right? And so there's all the way on one side is this abundance of caution. All the way on the other side is the move fast and break things that the technology sector is very used to. There's something in the middle that's got to make sense here, right? The things that we're doing should be backed by science, if not directly, to say that this particularly works, but like this class of things seems to work. Let's experiment with it. Let's innovate. Let's be quick. And there's a trade-off between those two there's a sweet spot there for us to be found. But I do want to say something in defense of the clinicians. Speaking as a tech guy, the solutions aren't tech. The best solutions that any of us can seem to have thought of, we've all ideated on this quite a bit. And the best things seem to be, how do you use tech to empower humans? So I'd like to place one word of defense for the clinicians, that if they see the traditional like tech approach, we're going to measure all the things and put a bunch of graphs up there. Yeah, that's not going to necessarily help anybody. And so carefully integrating that into care networks, finding out how to empower the things that are working, the human sides of this problem is I think the right way forward there, and I think where some of the resistance is coming from. End rant.
Student suicide, curious, do we need more clinicians good with technology or more technology people interested in mental health?
What do you mean or? I think and.
Yeah.
I think we went on both sides there.
Good news, we've got 5! Actually, it's plus 18 down here. Yeah, actually, the issue is any of the good advances made sort of these days, and many days, honestly, it's collaboratively. And so you really just got to find a lot of people who say we're interested in the problem and we think that we can work together. I know that I put a lot of effort into learning to at least interpret the other language and sort of approximate it. But yeah, we need both. But before we finish up, Tony Wood, and I'll circle back to you, Nathaan. Tony Wood, your thoughts about why do mental health professionals shy away?
Well, I think they're terrified. They've got no training. They have no support. They're terrified, and they have good reason to be terrified. It's really possible that there's various things that can happen to them in the course of practicing medicine that can cause them a lot of trouble if they mess it up, and if they don't do it based upon a standard, if they don't meet certain requirements, if they have no plan, they just try to pick up a tool. There's a lot of tools online. There's a lot of apps on your phone that nobody's ever studied. And their patients come in, or people that they know come in with some app that they like, and you can't really adopt those without some kind of standard. So somebody adopts one, something happens, agency freaks out, they go, no technology ever. Just to make
the answer.
Because the attorney, if you ask an attorney this question, the attorney goes, no, don't do that.
No. And I will say, and then I'm going to circle back to Nathaan, we have things like the Milgram studies. So where we got incredibly valuable research, but people really were hurt, and now we're making movies about it. And so there was this period of research in psychology where people were harmed, and also great research was done. And we haven't ever really recovered from that. Nathaan.
Thank you. Building off of all those things, I think another piece that we don't do a great job is in our training, we are taught to work with people once they come in our doors in the four walls of therapy. And I know for myself, I didn't get a ton of training on what do we do to keep people well. And I think of the positive psychology movement, which is doing some great work on resilience and all that. But that's not ingrained in everyone's training. And I think we don't know how to do it. And a lot of what tech is doing, not exclusively, but a lot of tech is on this upstream side. And that's where I think a lot of the power is. And it's a lot of unknown for us, from our lack of theoretical underpinnings to not having a lot of evaluation out there about it. Speaking to that fear.
Not having a lot of evaluation. We had a wonderful question from Lisa Sullivan at Stop Texas Suicide saying, has anybody done any kind of research or analysis where we've taken a technology solution and we've substituted it in and then seen if we had different outcomes? I think if I understood that question right. Anyone?
I don't know of any studies, kind of like control studies, in-person therapists versus CCBT or something like that. But there are some evidence behind CCBT and online modules and things like that, but can't speak to the randomized control.
So there's been a couple of analysis of apps, and the data isn't great. I mean, we had those folks on SPSM that did an evaluation of the prescribed app. Tony, who were those folks? They had the app that's prescribed as part of therapy. You only get it through
it's not FDA.
The Petrino Lab. So we had David Petrino, who's lovely.
And we also had 7 Cups of Tea has had evaluation of the 7 Cups of Tea site, right? And they're doing a lot of stuff on 7 Cups of Tea. So we're starting to develop an evidence base. A lot of the apps that are out there, I think that when we've talked about this in the past, a lot of the apps are like supplements, right? They're unregulated. Anybody can just make an app, and everybody's saying use these apps, and we have no idea if they're really working or not. There are some folks that are doing, and Centerstone,
other interventions like that aren't apps.
We do. Yes, we do.
Them.
And Centerstone currently developed a suicide prevention app that is prescribed as part of your treatment, and they're currently doing a randomized evaluation where people who are in suicide care follow-up, some of those folks have the app and some folks don't, and they're crunching those numbers now. So we'll actually get to see did adding the app make a difference? And so far they've been pleased with the results, and the folks that have been using it have really liked it. So, and that's why I want to get them on.
So, and also just so that you know, in 2 weeks, we're going to have Jen Lucy James from Crisis Text Line. So they do a lot of A/B testing where they're developing their tech platform, and they make changes and they measure outcomes, and they, then launch different iterations of the projects of their products. They keep data about that. And when I went and I was seeing them, I'm like, this has really got to be in a paper. They're like, well, we're a tech company and we're not interested in publishing clinical papers, which is, by the way, true, because that's a very expensive thing to do. Nathaan, I saw your face going.
No, I was just agreeing with you 100%. And I think we need more intersectionality moving forward between mental health providers, tech folks. We need a lot of different people at the table to make these things really work.
Additionally, I think to publish a paper, to do a clinical trial, often, to get the approvals and everything does a long time, takes a long period of time. You may spend several years on a project like a platform like Crisis Text Line. I know they turn over products about every couple of weeks. And so they're really, the research process and the tech development process really don't dance at the same speed.
Not at all. I was reading an article this morning that was submitted in 2014, revised, accepted in 2015, published a month ago. And in the tech world, literally, you said, a tech startup is every 2 weeks, someone's out, someone's in. So the two don't jive. That's all there is to it.
And Sean, who is moderating for us, and this is speaking of last names that I still can't get. I've known Sean for years, Nathaan. Bart, how do you say his last name?
Erriger.
I always get it wrong.
It's like grr.
I know. You say the tiger thing.
Tony the Tiger.
Stepping out of the mod box. to say the cost of doing the research and HIPAA are two main barriers to tech introductions. Trust me, I ask a lot.
Well, I'm gonna chime in on that though, because it's really, so the problem is that so many people have crappy attorneys. If you actually get a hold of a group of attorneys, this is true, if you actually get a hold of a group of attorneys that are at the cutting edge of stuff, they actually will give you great advice and think technology is an amazing thing. But you've got attorneys, just like you've got clinicians that are still in the friggin' 80s with their knowledge base, man. Mm-hmm. And so like our law firm, Posinelli, is fantastic. And they got a group of folks who specialize in tech and technology and healthcare. And they helped us with things. And they're like, no, you can do this. And you actually should do this. And we need to do this stuff. So just like with tech, and therapy, you've got to find people that are cutting edge with legal stuff as well. And if you're in hospital systems are the worst. Yeah. They're just so conservative. They're afraid to do anything. But there's great legal advice out there for folks. You just got to find the right group.
No, we are planning to do, and we probably, I'm not going to work this question today. I'm about ready to do two, but there's questions about legalities and ethics of doing these tech projects. And and that's actually quite a difficult whole area. We're going to be doing a panel on this later in November. So I'm going to move past the ethics piece, but that's another one. It's just, there aren't even a lot of ethicists who understand this stuff. And so, and the lawyers and the ethicists and stuff need to sign off on it. So,
can I make one comment on the speed of research before you move
yes.
on? So this is also a spectrum, and so computer science is able to publish things a bit faster, 9 months or something between research and publication for some of the venues. Even that's too slow, and so I've seen a lot of people starting to move to the sort of more 538 model where they're publishing blog posts that's serious science. They don't get credit for it in the way that they should. But there's that sort of an approach that is certainly possible, and I see at least a lot of my peers seem to want to move in that direction. And even within the company, we feel this way, that even waiting until the paper comes out is too late. We've already understood this, and we want to share it right now. So there is a movement towards that, and I think it may start in computer science, but it's got to go elsewhere. As technology gets integrated in all the science that we're doing, the publication of it and dissemination of it has just got to move faster. If only there was like a suicide prevention social media channel where we could push out all this information.
Yeah, I don't know.
And our next question is from you all, and also from Dr. Julie Cyril, rhymes with Farrell. I'm so sleep deprived. But she specifically says, so how do we get the apps evaluated or demoed by suicide prevention researchers? And you guys talked about that, like how do we evaluate these? And I'm going to say that this is on everyone's mind. Was listening to a project with some IBM VA sort of participation, and they were talking about, you know, the mental health apps that were out there. How do we classify them? How do we categorize them? What makes them effective or not effective? What are the gaps in what they do? I'm going to start with the technologists, and then I'm going to move to the mental health folks. So Glenn or Tony, who's first? How do we evaluate apps and technology?
I think there's two levels of evaluation here, at least two, right? One of which is you guys say this like the technology is a thing. Like it's a box that you guys have bought. It's like one of those pieces of software from the 80s, Bart, that you bring home and you plug in and it's done. But that's not the way that software lives anymore, especially in this sort of stuff where it's as much science and research as it is a technology product. So there's sort of internal, as Crisis Text Line, as 7 Cups, as you talked about there's internal A/B testing that's going on all the time as these products are evolving. So there's one set of these sorts of experiments and evaluations that are internal to the company where we're learning things as we're building these things. And I can tell you that it looks like X is the case. And so I know 7 Cups has this great example about schizophrenia people talking, the hours of the day that they end up talking about, that they end up utilizing the service. And so this is late at night. And so is that...
And by the way, that wouldn't be a question researchers would even think to ask. But go ahead.
Right. But it just falls out of the process of trying to build a product that is going to help a certain population. You're going to learn about them in ways that you might not have thought you would have otherwise. So they haven't been quiet about that. They've said, this is something that we found. And yes, we don't have like 12 peer-reviewed things with all the references, but this is what our data is telling us. And so there's this one sort of internal evaluation that's going on all the time. And I think anyone who's doing this dev could be more open about the scientific findings and sharing them. I think we're as guilty of this as anybody else. But the other side of this... I'll take it. That's fine. We'll work on that. The other side of it, though, is these external evaluation, the randomized control trials and things like this. As clinicians, you have access to people. You have access to other clinicians. You have access to patients for which one could do randomized control trials. As a tech company, we do not. And so bridging that gap has been a continual challenge. And it takes a lot of working with people and building relationships so that one could be ready to go do a randomized control trial. And so that's the evaluation that you guys are looking for is partially because those relationships don't exist. And hospitals, you could imagine, some of them are legally afraid of some of these things because who knows what this tech app is going to do? Is this going to help? Is it going to hurt?
You don't
Very
want
unlikely to hurt.
You don't want to be the next Stanley Milgram. Tony
Yes.
Wood.
I don't mind being the next Stanley Milgram if we make progress. I'm willing to deal with it. The problem is the lack of progress. I mean, that's my real message. Is we've got to stop moderating ourselves because we're not making any. We got to look at our real outcomes and say to ourselves, these problems are not getting better. Our access to care is not getting better. Our opiate addiction problem in the United States is totally off the hook. Our suicide problem is not going so hot. So we've got to stop acting like we have time to moderate every bit of our behavior and say, oh, well, we'll just talk to the attorneys and maybe next year. And, oh, well, the IRB isn't interested in this way. Could we rewrite this? In 6 months, we'll be able to discuss it. No. It's like 5 people a day that are dead from suicide. An hour. 5 people an hour are dead from suicide. In the U.S. alone, across the world, I don't know. I mean, I'm not even sure if that number's solid. That's just using the numbers that people approve of. So we've got to get we got to get the ball rolling here, kids. This is not, we can't stop. We can't keep stopping. So
we can't keep stopping. So Nathaan.
Absolutely. So 2 parts. So 1, how do we incorporate anything new into therapy? If you hear about a new breathing technique, a new relaxation something, how do we decide if that's good? And I think we use our clinical tools to try it out. And I would say if you find a new app that you're interested in, try it out. Figure out who are the developers. Was it made by mental health professionals? And is it patient or client centered? I think those are really important things that we have the skills to do. And the second piece, unfortunately, with a lot of suicide prevention, especially apps, figuring out the efficacy is really hard. It's kind of correlational. I think looking at engagement rates is really important. So how often are people using this? What are they saying if there's a social component to it? That's what we have to do. It's really hard to provide any sort of return on investment or anything like that, which unfortunately businesses, insurers are all really interested in. And the best we can do is kind of correlational data. So I think we really just need to turn back to our clinical skills and be willing to take them and apply it to this realm.
But you can do correlational studies. Okay, so
Totally.
maybe we will never get to the causational ones, but even the correlational ones are informative.
Absolutely. And I agree with you, but not everyone does.
Bart, any commentary?
Yeah, I do have a comment. I'm just thinking outside the box here. But sometimes it seems to me that we're using systems that were designed in the early 1900s to evaluate a culture and an environment that's like 2016. So I wonder when somebody's going to notice that, in fact, maybe the way we've been doing shit for the last 120 years or so needs to be updated. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. So I'm going to go on the record and say, yeah, that we need to get our shit together. Because here's the deal. Here's some really interesting things. Evidence-based practice. First of all, if you do a randomized control study and you find that it works, you got no guarantee that other people who are doing this evidence-based practice when they bring it into their office are actually doing the EBT the way that you did it in the randomized controlled trial. So all this EBT crap is so much bullshit in the first place, right? Don't even get me started. We all got to say we got to do it, but everybody who does EBT and does randomized controlled trials knows that the shit falls apart when you get into real practice because therapists do their own stuff anyway.
You have non-standardized therapists and non-standardized patients.
So everybody, I'm doing cognitive behavioral. Yeah, sure you are. You say you are, so you must be. So I think that we've. Oh yeah, I said it. So it's really interesting that for when it's words and when it's our relationship, we take these risks. Therapists take risks all the time to things they do with patients, but all of a sudden when you add this tech angle, all of a sudden, oh, that's scary. Oh, get over yourself. Two, I think Glenn's point is a really, really good point. Technology is just a tool. It's how we use it, and it's about enhancing our relationships, right? We have this model of therapy. Whoever said that 1 50-minute a session a week is the way that you do therapy? Who decided that, right? The other thing, I'm going to really hit this because randomized control has its place, but we need to start using quasi-experimental designs because that's how therapy is really done. We need to be looking at things in organic environments, and we need to be replicating what's really happening and evaluating things the way things are really done instead of doing it in these artificial lab environments and then saying, go do this, when everybody damn well knows nobody's doing it that way, right? So we got to get up to speed. And the turnaround time on these articles is ridiculous, right? I mean, so how in the world, think about this for a minute. Imagine if we had a flu problem and we developed a vaccine and we waited 3 years to see if it had any efficacy or not. We don't do that. Nobody does that. Whenever there's a crisis, people, boom, boom, boom. I think we got a crisis. I'm going to say the suicide rate being up 30% and the fact that we don't have enough clinicians and enough people to serve people and that people are dying is a crisis where we need to start thinking outside the box and have some urgency. And I don't see the urgency. I see a lot of complacency out there.
So I got a lot of, we need to do this. And I heard about sort of, using our clinical skills to see if things do this. So I will say, and I'm going to step out of the mod role, that I'm a clinician who's used a lot of different kinds of technology tools with real life patients, usually with complex diagnoses and complex settings. And I will say that the through line with all of that is that when I have done that, and we did publish on the Participatory Medicine Journal, we did publish about one of them. But where we were offering the tech tool in the same way, roughly, and we kept a few things in mind. We kept in mind safety. We talked about the technology is not your fail-safe. Here's your safety plan. This is your fail-safe. So we always set that up. We talked about their privacy and, the same things you would do when you're just disclosing the real basics about therapy, right? When you do informed consent, you're going to do informed consent about like the privacy or the data use, and you're going to do informed consent about like how we're going to use that information, how it's going to up in the record and how we're going to handle it. And then the second thing that we did, and then we do this all the time with apps, is that I have people check in. How's that going? Did you use it? So you said it was great and used it 2 days out of 7 days. So I don't think it's cueing you to use it. Do we need to set a reminder? Does that app not have one? I'm thinking about, you really should, this is just my opinion, but based on my experience, if you don't have an engagement rate between 70 and 90%, meaning that people use it for long enough for you to have either clinical data you can act on or a measurable change in behavior, that the app is people won't do it if people won't do it naturally, like keep using it. It's not a good app. And then you've really got to have something that creates clinical information, something that you can make a treatment decision on, or it creates a change in a clinical outcome. And I feel like those are two really important sort of standards. Any other thoughts about standards?
I was just going to say, those are really important for people coming in your door that you're working with. But what's harder is, again, looking at suicide prevention, what about people who aren't coming in our doors? And how can we get those engagement rates and have standards for, we know, is it 70% of people who die by suicide have never seen a mental health provider? So how can we develop apps that can reach those people long before you're able to see that engagement rate or that behavior change? So I think that's a real challenge that we have to figure out.
So it would be, you would want to identify something that worked. Glenn knows and can say that there are ways we could probably come closer to identifying or making the finding the needle in the haystack of folks who are at imminent risk. Well, not imminent risk, like imminently likely to die by suicide, make that haystack very small, and then measure to see how engaged they were. Glenn, I think there was some discussion about a Twitter bot. Am I allowed to talk about that?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Really, you don't, or not?
I think you might be sleep deprived, April.
So
I will respond to the first piece of that. You're absolutely right that a lot of what we've been looking at and publishing on is that we have some of these analyses that are sort of scalable, and that we could look at a much wider population and do some sort of screening of a wide population if that was the correct thing to do, right? There's actually two gigantic problems with that idea. The technology exists to do it. That here's the two giant problems. The first of which is the public does not think that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. And so either we have to convince the public to change its mind, or we have to say, yep, okay, it doesn't matter that the technology exists. You are actually the recipient of any benefits here. You don't want us to do that. We won't, right? So that's part one. That's one big issue, is the public doesn't think that this is a good idea currently. And if you need evidence of that, go look at the Samaritan's Radar thing and things related to that, right? The second part is that the big challenge is, even if we could identify, let's say we identified all the people at risk, 10% of the people at risk in the country. Somebody I know has numbers about what happens what's the next piece, right? If we got all the people that are at risk of dying by suicide into therapy, how much understaffed are we?
We would have to train a third of the working U.S. adult population in mental health, train them and certify them to provide the evidence-based therapy that we know works in order to treat folks who are high risk at the scale that they exist in the United States.
Just adults, by the way. No,
right, we're not going to help the kids. The kids are on their own.
So let's just put this in context, right? So that piece of technology has outpaced the ability for us to deliver treatment. And so it's very clear, at least to me, that we need to then figure out how to make treatment more scalable. Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's the thing we have to stop and think about a little bit, because then we can have discussions about all the other things. But until we are able to sort out what we do with the people that are at risk, it's not even worth trying to figure out how to screen more people, because there's nothing there.
Yeah. And I was just realizing that I was talking about something that I heard from University of Oregon, so that they're generating something that is going to go through the Twitter API and advertise their particular clinical app. Thank you for reminding me that I was asking the wrong person, Glenn, but someone's going to advertise their particular clinical app, and they had a certain number of click-throughs, and they got, I think, 6 or 7% of people who received the ad for the app, and they got targeted based on suicidal, on NLP analysis of their Twitter API, saying that they might be at high risk for suicide. And so of all of those folks, 6 or 7% would click through the app, use it, and look at it and play with it for long enough for a certain period of engagement. And so we do have things like that people are considering. Thoughts?
Can I jump in with something similar?
No.
Okay, fine. I'm doing it anyway. Unless you can mute me. Going back to the, okay,
I can inject you. Anyway, go ahead.
True, yeah. Going back to, if we identify all these people at risk, we need X amount of providers. But what about if we connect people with resources for resilience and convince people to get not convince, it's not the right word, destigmatize mental health, increase the likelihood of help-seeking behavior. So someone's coming in with mild depression, rather than waiting until they're acutely suicidal, that can lead to a very different system. And I think that's a demographic of individuals that I think we're forgetting to talk about in this conversation.
Absolutely, so, we could go upstream.
I'm going to chime in on that, because he's getting into something that's a huge issue, and the research that Madeline Gould has done on the Lifelines follow-up program has been very telling about this. Not everybody who has mental health or behavioral health needs to see a professional, right? We are so roped into this idea that you must go see somebody. Hey, guess what? A lot of people don't want to go see somebody, too. So really the question is, how can we meet people's needs in a way that they want their needs met, in a way that they found helpful? We need to start thinking about them instead of us. And this whole idea that we need to get people into office and they need to see a clinician. Gee, what if there's some ways that we can connect people to resources in their community, or each other, or to their family, or things that they can do online that would help them feel better? And I think this is really where we need to be going, right? And because we can't meet the demand with clinicians. And two, I'm not sure that we have to be quite honest. I think there's a lot of things that we can do to leverage natural resources and self-agency. John Draper with the Suicide Lifeline has been preaching this for years. Self-agency is huge for folks. We need to amplify that, reinforce that, and build on it, instead of saying, everybody, you need to go see a psychiatrist, you need to go see a therapist. Maybe some do, but I think a lot of folks don't, and they don't want to.
Right. And my expertise is with the college counseling age. And I think of students, if we can connect them to the right club, maybe they form those relationships, have a new support network, and never have to get in to see a mental health provider. And there's a lot of different ways we can do that. So appreciate that point, Bart.
Julie's Cyril rhymes with Farrell. Sorry, I'll call her Sorrel, and that's wrong. And they let me do it for 2 years. So she's asking a lot of questions about IRB review and ethicists. Julie, I promise we will talk about the ethics of this and reviews for these things, like in terms of. But that's, I swear, in November. We're not going to do it. November. So folks. We want to talk a little bit about when it comes to technology tools. There's maybe, I think Dr. Coppersmith called it, a little bit of tension between the Q's and the H's, the quantifiers and the humanity folks. And what do you think causes that sizzling, smoky tension between all of us? And what should we do to resolve it?
So the sizzling tension, I think, is a discussion longer than we have time for here. But it has to do with the people that fundamentally enjoy statistics. Ooh. And the people that don't, that fundamentally enjoy people, right? Like, I'm a little bit glib, but people have pursued these different trajectories in their professional careers, either for some affinity or for some aptitude, and there are distinctly different personality types. Surely you guys have noticed this before about staring at people's shoes and stuff. But there is a tension there just because we've been brought up in wholly separate disciplines, and we've been trained almost wholly separately to have, the empathy is really drawn out, and attention to nonverbal cues is drawn out as part of any sort of clinical process and clinical training. And most computer scientists, not so much. Coldly rational, you think about data and Spock sort of stuff, right? And
there's, by the way, wonderful clinical research on the Holland sort of codes of vocation, and there's really that the folks it's RIASEC, RIASEC, and the therapists are all on one side of the hexagon, and the research scientists, data folks are all on the other, and that's literally opposite. I mean, I don't think we're making it up that those are really opposing personalities and ways of being.
They're perhaps naturally, but I would see them as complementary. I mean, we look at problems very, very differently, and so we actually, I don't know if you know this yet, April, but I think you and I just have a paper that just got accepted about the clinical panel. So let me give me just a second to give a bit of an aside. So this SPSM did a great job of reaching out to the technologists, at least this technologist, a year and a half ago, where I had published some paper, and I was trying to do the right thing about looking at PTSD and using social media and doing some evaluation there. But I didn't know, I was approaching it from the computer science point of view, except for the fact that I do actually have a degree in psychology, so I wasn't totally lost in this whole thing. But you guys reached out and said, like, hey, come talk to us, and come let's share some stories, and let's integrate. And come show up and do this thing. And this thing is a bit nuts, but it's about right. So over the last year and a half, we've adapted to each other. You've learned a lot about data, as is proof by that necklace that you're wearing. And I've learned a whole lot more about the clinical side, and about what therapy looks like, and about what the problems within the complex system that is suicide prevention looks like. And so there is no quick fix there. But I think there's a natural complementary approach to this. Every time we get together, you have crazy ideas, I have crazy ideas, and some of them seem to sort of gel.
I feel like you're saying we should meet for coffee before we French kiss. Nathaan.
I unfortunately don't have too much more to add to that, especially after that comment. Got to get a little more focused. It's brilliant. I think, just going back to the RIASEC, different people, and we need different people at the same table talking about all this. I think kind of how we started our thing was getting tech people together with behavioral health providers, and a lot of great ideas came of it that neither of us would have ever come close to arriving at without having the other party there. And it's totally doable. We just need to have a willingness to reach across the table to some people that are really different than us, even if we're a little scared to do so.
Bart, thoughts?
Well, some things that have occurred to me over the years is that we are so isolated in academic environments. You've got psychologists in psychology. You've got social works in social work departments. You've got the computer science folks. What if hey, what if we integrated and there were psychologists in the computer science department and there were computer scientists in the psychology department? Oh my God, cats and dogs living together. I mean, this is the sort of thing that we need to have happen, that we've got these old antiquated systems where the power structure reinforces this inbreeding of problem solving, right? And as long as we keep doing the things that we're doing the way we're doing them, we're going to stay stuck. And so we talk about how cautious and how risk adverse we are. I'm going to say that, in fact, we don't have any caution. We are taking the hugest risk we've ever taken because we're not changing and we're not doing things differently, and we're not helping people the way that we could if we actually showed some moxie. And I think these are the sorts of things, these innovative things, not just in terms of collaborations now, but in departments, changing the whole structure. Let's blow the thing up. Anarchy everywhere.
So I feel like I shouldn't say it after this, but this has been the approach that Hopkins has taken in some places. And so you'll note
Hopkins, anarchy everywhere. Go ahead.
There's the anarchy is not what Hopkins has gone for. Let me phrase that. But they've sort of blown up some of the traditional department boundaries, and they founded these centers. And this is not a particularly new phenomenon, but they've been doing it sort of routinely. And so, at least in the natural language processing group, the Center for Language and Speech Processing that I had worked in, they came up some of the very fundamental research that has driven forward things like Siri and Google Translate. A lot of that fundamental research was done when they blew up those barriers and created these cross-discipline centers. And there is something to it. It takes a very, very long time because it's like SPSM all day, every day, where we're speaking about the same things with different words.
And can I tell you, I had just an amazing time. I have a couple of pointers for folks who want to do that kind of work. Number one, if you're extroverted at all, you're going to be in a room full of data folks who are introverted. So you have to the intensity goes from Doc Foreman 11 to, if I can get it down to 6, God love them. Additionally, you in the humanities, I think you've got a lot of folks who are, let's look at another side. We can take 5 months to make that decision. We don't need to make it in 5 minutes. Let's reconsider it again. And the issue, a lot of the quantifying development folks are the cues are like, we need to be doing iterations and turning things over. And so they're really just personality differences that people think are concrete, outside of you, ways you must behave. And I feel like that creates a lot of friction. Tony, you haven't chimed in a minute.
What are the incentives, boys and girls? Who pays for all this nonsense?
Tony!
What do you mean, no one? What?
Aren't there people
who
develop things and invent things?
That make money? There are. You know, it's some of the most exciting work in psychology. Guess where it's done? Advertising. Because they got a product that people want to buy.
Don't people who buy more Coca-Cola?
Yeah, Coca-Cola. It's those healthy drinks that they sell at Whole Foods for $7 a piece. They have all weird names that I can't pronounce, but people love them.
So
could we do more of that? That's what I'm saying. Is that possible that we could sort of focus on producing a product that people wanted to buy instead of this other thing?
Is the new Hangouts? Do we have cricket sound effects?
But Tony raises a really good point, and one of the things that we don't talk about, and this is where we talk about interdisciplinary teams. We don't talk about economics and economic theory and all this crap that we're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a huge science about what motivates people, and actually some of the best research about what motivates human beings is not in psychology, it's in economics, right? And so there's this whole study. There are these experts that actually understand how to do this, but how often do we bring in these folks to the table and saying, hey, we've got this problem, help us out? So the second thing is that free market principles are much more challenging around healthcare issues, right? And so that creates some real challenges because the things that typically work with the free market economy start falling apart when you talk about healthcare. Doesn't mean we can't find a hybrid, right? But I'm not an expert in that sort of stuff, and it'd be great to get somebody that understands money and what motivates people to help us out with. Tony, you see where I'm going with this? See where I'm going? And it doesn't mean we need to French kiss anybody to get them to pay attention.
We still can if we want to.
Yes, it's on the table. We're going to leave it on the table.
Nathaan, any thoughts before I switch to the last topic?
Similar to that, I think how innovation comes within our field is often through grants. And you think of this tech world, and when you write a grant that's 5 years and you dot every I and cross every T, and in the world of tech, you start doing it, you do user testing, and you find out you have to go a totally different way, that doesn't fly with grants. So a lot of our traditional ways of innovation don't work in these pipelines. So we are looking, Tony, I think you bring up a great point of who funds it? How do we get this stuff going?
And I want to hop in one piece longer there. Nathaan, if you spent 6 months working on a grant or 6 months working on a product,
who's paying your time there?
Well, which is the better use of your time?
Right, absolutely.
Which is better use of my time, right? And so there, yes, okay, we could eventually get money and do some of these other things, but you're absolutely right that the old like biology, huge experiments, R1 grant sort of system really just doesn't fit this problem anymore. And they have some more innovative ones, but still, like SBIR, right, 9 months or something between submission and funding. Companies don't last that long unless they have some other way of making money.
Right,
so it's a huge problem.
Time.
I would have to say, and I'm just going to, like, if I misspeak, Tony Glenn, but I really feel like Quantify and a few other companies really has to think, in order for them to do projects like Our Data Helps, which you guys really just did out of a sense of mission, but certainly not out of a sense of profit, you have to have all these other revenue streams. It's, Tony, our sense of passion is not the same as a bank account, and that is true. For the last line, this was a question proposed by Dr. Glenn Coppersmith, and it is a really, really good one for us going into the Project Opportunity Innovation Summit. If we, like in BASB, we had Dr. DJ Patil, who was, the chief of the White House's Office of Science and Technology, chatting with me. Speaking of a Muppet Show booking, and we were talking about, like, what would we ask for if we could get the attention of people like legislators, venture capitalists, or people who were really interested in funding life-saving healthcare innovation. Like, what would we tell them? What would we ask for? Nathaan.
Whew, that is a tough one. I think one thing we need to ask for is more spaces to be able to get people at the same table doing this work. Right now, how do we fund doing that? Who does it? Who takes charge? And we don't have answers. We don't have that forum. I think there's hackathons for other things, but not for this. So how do we make that happen?
They have the hackathons, but they're like not really. It's hard to say. And you're totally right. We're trying to work on that, but keep going, Nathaan.
These problems are too big for a 2 or 3 day hackathon, and so you're right. We need a sustained place where we can do this without a doubt. The hackathons get things started, but we need sustained without a doubt.
Yep. JSALT was amazing because there is this so wonderful foundation that just has resources, and so they get all of these linguists like 6 weeks for the summer, and they get a tremendous amount of work done. So imagine if you could get people together, who are able to sacrifice the time, and you can put them up and give them living quarters and an excellent place to do work for a stretch. You could probably make great leaps forward, but there are no funders for that, and there are no venues for that right now. We're working on it. That's a great one. Yeah. So other folks, Tony.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, nothing, because you were scratching your nose, and so I thought that was a sign. Bart Andrews, no more nose play. Bart Andrews.
So what would we ask for? What would we want, right? And I think that's a big question, and it's a tough one to answer. Some things that we really need is money. Right? And we need money that's made available quickly to do things that are innovative, and where there's quick demands, and you've got to speed up the process, you've got to give people the freedom. So many grants have so many strings and so many rules and so many barriers to jump through that they're spending all this money, but they water the process down incredibly, right? So that basically, when we do grants, it's interesting. You know how much time goes into just managing the grant? right? It's crazy how much of the actual resources they give you are literally just to have the grant. It's like, come on. So you've got to free that money up, right? And you've got to make it readily available, and you've got to make that turnaround time quicker. So those are things. The other thing that we really need is we need people to step up and say, this is fucking important. So it's not just about money, because money helps a lot, but we need big agencies to say that this is important and we're going to do something about it, and we're going to put not just our money behind this, but our voice behind it. And it's really interesting. There's all kinds of different things. Nobody is accountable for behavioral health, mental health, and suicide. Who has taken accountability for it? Nobody's owning it. Now, I will say the VA is one of the few agencies that has owned the suicide issue in their setting, right? And you can see what happens when a large institution says, hey, this is us and we're going to take responsibility for it. It's amazing, right? We really need a sense of ownership and people.
Painful. I like, do not, it is, and we're able to do things like, and this is why I have that job. But do not, so we're in the news with a level of accountability for suicide deaths that no civilian agency is ever held to. But anyway, go ahead.
And I think it's why when people rag on the VA, I get really upset, because the VA has done more and made more progress in preventing suicide than just about any other agency, and they've done this at a national level. The scope of it is huge. Doesn't mean there aren't things that can't be better, and that doesn't mean there aren't things that happen that shouldn't happen, just like everywhere else. But the level of accountability needs to be honored and rewarded, and not punished, which is what we see, right? And we need more folks doing that. At the state level, who owns the state suicide problem? Nobody stepping in and saying, this is us, we're going to take responsibility for it. We need big folks to step up and say, you know what, we need a Harry S. Truman for suicide prevention. The buck stops here. This is our problem. We're going to do something about it. That's what I want.
That's great. Dr. Glenn Coppersmith.
I'll be real quick. If we get someone who is really able to have that kind of a megaphone, there are two things that we are currently treating as absolutes that I think are actually spectra, and that there's a trade-off, one of which is privacy. And so privacy, we touched on this earlier, there's a cost for privacy. If we're not intervening with people that are at risk, we are going to lose some of those people, a lot of those people. And so I'm not saying they need to change that, but only someone at a high level could have that conversation and change the public discourse about that. That's ask one. Ask two is very similar in that there is a IRBs and policies are petrified that we're going to do something that's going to damage people, the people that we're studying. And there's a real risk where if we are going to stay, to Bart's point earlier, to everyone's point earlier, right? If we move slowly and methodically, we're losing 100 a day. So there's a trade-off there that we have to think through that I think is different than the absolute of privacy and the absolutes of not quite the Hippocratic Oath, right, but do no harm, very careful, methodic research. There's real cost to those. So I wish that there would be more public discourse about that, and perhaps a change in the mind of the public's mind. Inform them, and hopefully they will change their mind.
Absolutely. So with ethics, for those of you guys who don't spend time memorizing the biomedical principle or the principles of biomedical ethics, step one, do no harm. Step two, do good if you can. We are not always getting to step two. And if people continue to die and we're not turning that around, and sometimes the death rate's going up, I don't know that doing nothing is no harm. And I mean, I think that's the really big thing, is that we need to have, stigma is important, parity is important, and we've been talking about that for 30 years. We've got now a real shot at doing something different. So my big ask, and this will be my final thought as we go into final thoughts, my big ask is that we now start having conversations about opportunities and options that we've only had in the last couple of years, not things we've been thinking about for 30 years. It's time to have some new conversations. So if you're a person in power can make this happen, can you make bigger, more salient current conversations happen? Who wants to go? We're doing final thoughts. I can't believe the hour went like that. Who wants to do final thoughts next? Who's feeling it? Glenn, oh my goodness, his hand's up.
Super fast. We've talked a lot about great ideas here, and there's a lot of changes in strategy in different teams, that there is a lack of strategic communications, that we need a national a international, a global strategic communications here. None of this is going to be nearly as effective if it is only shown to the suicide prevention people and the couple tech people we can bring with us. The problem is way bigger than that.
That's what Rory
Yep.
Rory, our friend Rory from the East Wing, the First Lady's East Wing, who said, "Where are your strategic comms if this is so important?" And we went, okay.
That's right. Absolutely right.
Tony Wood, final thoughts.
Strategic comms. If you haven't donated your data, visit ourdatahelps.org, would you? That's all I got.
All right. Bart Andrews.
Final thoughts come from Dr. Jonathan Singer, who said that we need to have Glenn and Nathaan on every single show. That's how good. If you guys don't know, the thread has been popping. This show has been fantastic, and for the amazing Dr. Singer to say, "Hey, we need to have you guys every week," is a major compliment. That's my parting thought.
Dr. Demers.
Thank you. Nailed it, sort of, kind of. I'll just ignore it. There's a lot of pressure, kind of last thought. Along with what Glenn said, we all have to get out of our own silos. We need to be willing to think upstream. We need to be willing to work with schools, with public organizations, with other disciplines within our field. We're all way too siloed. And I forgot who brought it up earlier. I think it really does stem from our academic training. And we need to look at that fundamental change and figure out ways to incrementally, I mean, I'd love to go the anarchy route. I don't know if that's going to happen, but find ways to chip away at that.
And this is at Dr. Foreman. It is at the hour. Thank you so much for joining us. This was really, really good. If you continue to have thoughts, please do continue to chat about questions about that we need to be talking about at the intersection of technology and suicide prevention. What are things we aren't saying? What are ideas we need to talk more about? This is your moment, because it will end up in the archive. Next week, we were going to have another all-star panel, because we're going to be talking about 2016, the year of the live stream, and how live streaming is really fundamentally sharing or impacting idea sharing in suicide prevention. And it really did take quite a turn this year. And we're going to have Dr. Mike Sevilla and Chris Maxwell, who are going to be joining Dr. Bart Andrews and Mr. Tony Wood and myself. So come see us next week. Have a wonderful week. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
See ya.
Goodbye. Woo!